Hey, I'm Sid, and this is the longer introduction to Effortless IFS, which is a celebration of you. It's a celebration of everything that arises in us, both the contractions and the spacious, loving peace, all of it. And absolutely no experience or background in IFS or the practices are necessary because we just start with what's here now. So we play on kind of three different levels at the same time. It's like one of those games where you've got, I don't know, there was like a battleship game where you had different levels going on. And so this is a game where you're playing three different levels simultaneously. It's like, what? And the good news is nothing that you don't have to figure any of this out. But it just makes it more interesting, dynamic. And that the first level is just called the playing field. Like playing, it's always nice to hear that word, right? And it's just an exploration of the interaction of the sky with the weather. Because we use this metaphor a lot. The idea that there is whatever we find as our nature. What is your nature? We call that the sky, we call it beingness, and in IFS we often call it self. And it's just what is the background that's always here for you? Is it is it calmness? Is it peace? Is it presence? Is it, the Buddhists might call it equanimity or awareness? Is it love? Is it what the athletes would call it flow? The artists call it flow. Is it a sense of ease? Is it connectedness? What is it? Is it a stillness? Is it an aliveness? Is it a vibration? And that's the background. And then what's the relationship between that and what comes and goes? That we think of as what the weather comes and goes, right? And we think of this as the thoughts, feelings, and sensations that arise in us. And all we do, we kind of we utilize some of the technology, the clarity, the wonder of internal family systems, because what they do is we get to know this weather, these thoughts, feelings, sensations. We label them as parts. And so why do we do that? It allows us to be aware of them sort of as objects. Like when you're aware of something, there's awareness of it. And so in that moment, you're not identified as it. Because a big part of this game is discerning between the weather and the sky. And this is the whole idea of getting to know these qualities of beingness. And then we have all these different ways we do it. But that's the playing field, is a relationship between those two, between the parts and the self. And this is for both and then we have views. Maybe I'll speak a little about that on that first level. For example, this the first view is the celebration of everything that arises in us. All of these thoughts, feelings, and sensations that we label as parts, just celebrating them, and we start to see the innocence of everything that arises in us, even the beauty of it. And it's a real core of this work that everything that arises, we start to see that there's an intent for our best interest, even if it's like a really harsh critic, like, you did it wrong, you messed up, you should have done it differently, what's wrong with you? Like, we all know critical voices like that. But when we listen, we can hear, wow, it's really not wanting us to make a mistake again, wanting things to be easier. And you can hear the intent. You can also hear the innocence of it. And what's so funny is this mentor of mine, Dick Schwartz, who developed IFS, from like being with thousands of people, and now this is one of this thing they're calling IFS, this internal family systems, is one of the like big global modalities of psychotherapy these days. And what they find is that these parts, so many of them are young. Even these critics, they come from young experiences of ours. And so anyway, we this first view is just appreciating them. And sometimes there's a sense of compassion and love that opens up to them, and celebrating. That's why in Effortless IFS, our tagline is celebrating everything. But we're going to make this real. You might be at this point, it's like, yeah, this is just some silly new age thing. But stay with me here. So that's the first view. And the second view, we call it riding the bike of being. Remember when you learned how to ride a bike? It wasn't like you could read about it and someone said, hey, this is how you do it. It's like, okay, I know how to do it. Now get on the bike. No, no, right? Maybe you did that, but it was really getting on and then finding balance. Like, whoa. And then, oh, it's like, Dad, don't let go. Don't let go. And then you let go and, oh. But then it's like something learned, right? Like balance learned, something that's like you started to find it. You started to find the balance. And then suddenly you're like, hey, wait, no hands. How am I doing that? Wow, something learned, something knows. And so we play the same thing with this that we're calling the self, which can be peace, love, and fulfillment. It can be whatever your words are for it. But there's a sense of this, or it might be okayness, or a sense of stillness or presence. And we start to find it. The system starts to know it. And this the second view is just like this discernment between like finding balance. Like there's a system learned balance, and then when it started to sway, it's like, whoa, that's not it. Come back. Uh, just that. And then here I'm going to go a little quicker. So that's the second view, and this is yeah, this is like some of the spiritual practices out there, like Advaita Vedanta. This is just that too. This is just like, well, who is this Trusa? Who is what's always here? What's always here? Or the work of Byron Katie. It's like if you don't believe your thought, what's here? And so in the second view, we kind of have a loving indifference to the parts. We're not really interested in them. We're just here. And again, this is something we've all done in so many different ways in our life. Like if it's riding the bike or driving a car, where the system learns to ignore certain things and just focus on what needs to learn. And I went to law school, right? In law school, it's all about that. It's learning to think like a lawyer. And so much of that is like what to just ignore and keep your focus here. So that's the second view. And the third view is the healing of the system. Like, how do we heal? Like, so many of us have, like, we had difficult things have happened in our lives. I've been fired from a job. I've had my heart broken, in relationship. I've had people say, when I was a kid, say really, really mean things to me. And I've had, just all the things that occur to all of us in life. It just happens, right? It's the richness of this life. But sometimes something contracts and it just kind of holds. And it's like, oh, I know better. I'm not going to do that again. Or there's a little bit of fear that comes. And it's really addressing the contraction and fear in our system. And again, we call these come as the weather, as the parts. And how are they welcomed home? And that's where you have lots of healing modalities for this. And I love the healing modalities. What we're exploring here is an awareness practice of this that complements the healing modalities, the active practices. So in this one, we become aware of the background, the beingness, the love that's here, whatever it is for you. And then we also become aware of the parts in the foreground. And and here it's a little, this is where it gets a little hard because we don't just become aware of one part, we become aware of multiple parts. Like we're seeing a photo and we see them all here. We see that, like, look at the photo instead of looking at the individual atoms, like the sense of, wow, it's a galaxy and the constellation of planets, or it's an infinite hot tub of being and the parts are all soaking in it. So we get to see that. And as the system updates to this third view, this is where the healing just occurs in the background. That the contractions, I want to be seen. I want respect. I want my job to be better. I want to be happy. I want flow. I want my body to work better. I don't want this person that I love to be sick. All that contraction, it gets to be held and welcomed in the beingness. And this is the third view. And that's really where most of our work gets done. And then for some folks, we just include the fourth view is when we get glimpses of that even the parts, that nothing is separate, everything is of this beingness, that there's not separation. And the fifth view is really fun, but it's like when there's a sense of the simultaneous awareness, the sense of being aware of the foreground, these parts, and also aware of the beingness that's here, and it's both. It's really nice when we have both of these. And so when that happens, we no longer, it in this model, suffering comes from one thing. How does suffering happen in your system? How do you find suffering? In this model, it only happens when we blend with a part, when we blend with a thought, feeling, or sensation, when we identify with that. And that's blending with a part. But when we do, as we celebrate the parts, it becomes much more difficult. It becomes more difficult to blend. One, two, we're just being aware that they're parts, aware of them as objects. Two, if we can see two or more parts at the same time, it becomes quite difficult to blend with them if you're aware of two, right? It's usually when you're aware of one, like, gosh, I really want something to be different. I want politics to change. I want my girlfriend to be different. We blend with that and we start to feel the sensations. But if we're aware of two, it becomes really difficult. And then there's the simultaneous awareness when we're aware of the parts and we're also aware of the background, the beingness, right? It's like the parts are almost like they're being held. The beingness is here, like this okayness, the peace, the presence, however it blossoms in your system. And so this is supposed to be a big intro to effortless items, but I'm just bouncing around with you. But I'll go back to, I won't make this too long. So that's the playing field, right? And the playing field is just, that's what we do in our Zoom groups. And come join us. They're all no cost, and we just kind of play together and explore and support each other in this. And it's just the relation between self and parts. How does just just that? And then there's a second level, okay? And the second level are what we call the tipping points. And this is where the system learns. This is like, what do you mean? In IFS, we call it updating. It's like a learning, and it's like learning. Remember when you learned sports as a kid? And I mean, I love sports. Or maybe it was cooking, or maybe it was theater, or maybe it was, riding the bike, whatever you enjoy, whatever you remember the way we learned these things as a kid. It was kind of like a game. It was fun. Like I was horrible at sports, but I loved them all and I played them all and I was on teams for all of them and I sat on the bench a whole lot, but I just loved them. And but remember, even I mean, oh gosh, oh no, I have to go to basketball practice now. I have to play with my friends for 2 hours. It was like, it was so great. And then suddenly, well, I can dribble. Whoa, I can dribble around my back. Whoa, I can do a hook. And it like goes in. How did that happen? And it just happens. Or soccer. Suddenly you're terrified. The ball's coming at me. And you go hands. You're not allowed to do it. But eventually something happens and it's like, well, you want me to hit it with my chest? You want me to hit the ball with my head? No way. But you keep playing and suddenly you start doing these things and suddenly, whoa, I can kick the ball and it goes above the goalie's head. How did that happen? Same thing for this. So this is as we're playing together, this it just learns. It learns the discernment of that second view of discerning self from parts, right? The riding the bike of being. And that can be the whole game if we can just learn to rest here when we want and know that this is always here. It just learns. And so there we have these 10 tipping points. I'll just give you a couple of them. One is the this one is just that, just the discernment. Wow, they're parts of self. I'll just do these real quick. The second one is this, you're never alone. Your parts are never alone. Self is always here. What? Self is always here. You know this. Are you aware? You are aware. There's awareness here. Is there presence here? Is there vibration? Is there aliveness? It's always here, but as the system really starts to get that, everything changes as your parts get it, as you get that. The third is the sense of being able to see two or more parts at the same time, which again is huge because it makes it difficult to blend and it decreases your suffering like this significantly. The fourth is is taking it even more, is stepping back and being aware of this background, the beingness, as well as the parts. And this is where we all find our metaphors, like soaking in an infinite hot tub, or however this beingness meets your parts. And this is how the healing happens 24/7. The fifth, I think I'm getting this right. The fifth is the fifth is what your parts are longing for. I got confused here. Okay, so anyway, those are some of the tipping points, and then then we go to one where this is the sixth one where there's a sense of what our parts are really longing for. As you hear them, as you hear your parts, what is it that they're longing for? And you start to begin to hear that because this is the big shift. Because parts look for fulfillment through experience, relationships, objects, substances, etc. But as they start to recognize that that is not that is temporary fulfillment that comes and goes. They look for a deeper fulfillment as we hear the longing, what the parts are really longing for. Like what are you longing for? What is it that you really want? Really? And as you listen to that, you listen to your parts, and that what we find is our qualities of this being, this qualities of self, like acceptance, being seen, being welcomed, being a love, be safety, flow, peace, connectedness, belonging. These are all qualities of beingness. So as we start to hear what's really being longed for, then we go to the next tipping point, which is the seventh tipping point, which is we find what's most like what is being longed for that's here now. This is where we start to find that happiness and fulfillment can be found from beingness. Wow, wait, hey, there's some okayness here, there's some presence here, I'm aware of the parts, of seeing them, welcoming that all can be here. So we explore that. And then from there, we explore another tipping point, which is just intimacy. How intimate are we with the parts, which is another way of viewing this whole game, which is really how intimate are you with what arises in you? How intimate are you with the contraction that arises? And we don't push any of this. Again, this is effortless, this work. There's an awareness practice, so we notice, and it's just in time it opens because we also, with that intimacy, the other aspect of this capacity, there's a recognition of, well, this is my capacity, because when it starts to touch more of that, it's like, whoa, that's really scary. Going, you really want me to go back and go into those experiences when I was 10 and those guys were bullying me and it was horrible? I don't think so. It's like, because then something will kind of pull us away, right, or distract us. And it's like beautiful to notice that. It happens organically, the healing of our system in this way. And then the ninth tipping point is, again, it's just this recognition of the connectedness that's here with all of our parts. And the 10th tipping point is really fun. It's the idea of seeing kind of innocence, beauty, and perfection in everything that arises in us. And then everything that arises out in the world, seeing the innocence and beauty there. And noticing when we can't see it, that it's something left that gets to be welcomed home. And it's not bad news. These things that need to be welcomed home. This is where it all changes. Because usually, like, oh my God, that's my contraction. That's my fear. Or, oh, I don't like that. I want to be open and loving and flowing and peaceful and have fun. But the good news is everything changes in this way. And we start to see those arisings, those parts that can obscure the sky, right? The weather, the clouds can obscure the sky. But what really happens is we really hear what they're longing for. They're the ones that evoke the sky. They evoke self. They bring it more into our lives as we hear everything that arises in us as a wanting of these qualities of beingness, as our ears start opening to that. And so it all just happens in time. This is the playing field, right? This is the playing field. That's the playing field. The first level, second level are these tipping points. And as the tipping points start to open more in us, and you can see there's a gradual thing in looking at people as they're doing this, or when they're doing any therapy work, any therapy or any spiritual work, all this just kind of opens on its own. But what we're focused on here is having it be less of like what I went through for so many years, right? Like I know how you do this. You do this Zen way. I mean, I did these 10-day meditations where you're just looking at a wall, right? Or I did it through these different Buddhist practices, Tibetan Buddhist practices. You do these, all the meditations, the chanting, and then I did all these different kind of psychotherapies that have been incredible, right? IFS was wonderful for me. Somatic experiencing, so many different voice dialogue, all these different modalities. Nonviolent communication rocks my world. You'll hear some of that in here. But it's like, but then we're trying to look at how can we do this in a way that was like how we learned sports as a kid, or how we learned how to ride a bike, where, hey, the older kids are doing that. I want to go do it too. Let's play. And all of this so we just let it just happens. There's not a doing, and that's the third level, which is just, That's the third level of when we come. Remember, three levels as we come together in our Zooms or we practice or whatever this looks like. And the third level is it's almost like the beauty of what is. It's like the wholeness of what's here right now. It's like looking at yourself when you look at yourself in the mirror or as you feel this body right now. What if there's nothing that needed to change? What if all these parts that came up in you, what if everything that arises in you was just fine, okay, like wonderful? And you know what I'm talking about. You know when you see a newborn or you're at a kindergarten and you're watching all the kids in the playground and it's just like all that's there. Or you're with sometimes with animals, it's easier to see that innocence. All you see is just the perfection. You're not like the newborn baby. Oh, there's something wrong with that. Or the kids on the kindergarten playground. It's just like all you see is the innocence and beauty there, right? It's like what we're looking at is how do we get that for ourselves? And this is what we do in our groups. We'll focus on seeing that in each other and playing with it, seeing the innocence and the compassion and love for everything that arises in each of us. And where that eventually goes is we get to see it more and more in ourselves. And like, that's really fun, right? It's like when you go to when you're going to practice soccer or tennis and as a kid, it's like you want a coach that's going like, you're really bad at this. You have a lot you need to do. I don't know if you're ever going to be good at this. Or you want a coach like, wow, look at you. Wow, that is great. Great swing. Do that kick and all that. And then it's just like, then you just get to play. And then in playing, we learn. And that's what we try to do in this, right? It's like we play and when something learns, and then it's just, we just keep doing that. And those are the three levels we play with. And let's see if there are a couple more things I want to share. So that's been my thing over the last these years is trying to find a way to do it. Sometimes we do it as a dance party. It's just we try to find playful ways of having this learning where it's just enjoyable, and to me it goes quite deep, right? Because we're looking at how suffering occurs in our system, right? Which is again just blending with parts, and we're looking for where we can find sanctuary, okayness, peace. And that's what we call the self. And this all comes from Dick Schwartz's work in classic IFS. It just starts there, and then we're just exploring what does it look like just strictly as an awareness practice. And again, even though I use some of these IFS terms and blending and updating, blah, 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 you don't need any of it. My job, if I'm doing it right, is to just celebrate, meet you right where you are. No need of any of this. And you'll start picking on there's this IFS is wonderful, and there's a lot of gifts in that, but none of it is necessary for what we're doing because it is already included in the the playing field. It's included in all of this. So you just come and it's like you go and you're like, hey, you want to play basketball? Sure. Nah, you don't need to know all the rules. We're just going to play. Um, and I guess that's about it. This was a really long one, but I gave you a warning. It's the long intro. And it's also, yeah. And so I have so a couple more things, a couple last things. One, I put a whole lot of videos on this thing. And what might be fun for you is like the most fun area in learning are the movies page, right? I've got this whole movie clips and like movies that I found helpful for this, and I write a little thing. And then now I'm starting to on the Learn More page on the website, the very top, do these little 3-minute things about the movies and how they speak to this. Because sometimes let's make it, like we all love movies and try to the movies that we all know and a lot of them that we know. And it's like, how does it speak to what we're doing here? How does it speak to this sense of the weather that can obscure the sky for all of us and getting to know the sky? So I'm having fun with that. And then there's also an interview at the very bottom of the homepage um, where it was just these really fun guys interviewed me. So it was just a playful one. And it's evolved a bit since then. But so I hope this is useful. And lastly, there's a Facebook group. I have this incredible colleague, Laura Petraeus, and she's probably going to be one of she's coming out with a book on IFS and and her version of all of this, bringing it all together, which is probably going to be one of the primary books in IFS, is what my guess is, because she's really extraordinary. So we had this Facebook group together, and come join us. It's the IFS non-dual community, and just forget that word non-dual. It's just about the connectedness of everything, that this beingness, everything is kind of connected to being, but we're not doing, it's not a spiritual group. It's just what we're talking about here. So come be with us, and it includes all the spirituality, but with some people, it's not the focus on, it's just focus on you and your system. So again, I would say it's not a spiritual group. The IFS non-dual community Facebook group. You can come, post things, ask, and we just always, I'm on it every day. Laura's on it. Lots of really, really interesting people from different places are coming and interacting. We have a lot of fun, and we do these like things where we come together and we're getting to know each other. Videos, Zooms where we feature anyone who has their version of all of this who would like to be featured. It's like a community thing, and we're trying to. You can watch the video on I think if there's one on my page, and then there's on the Facebook page, there's some videos from me and Laura talking about the intent of the group. And so it's the idea of what does this look like if we're like a virtual Sangha and we support each other in this opening. And it's not, in no way is it me and Laura, we're in the background, and it's just like everybody. And so that's been the fun of this. So come play with that. Come to the Zooms. I try to do them like 3 to 5 times a week where they're just open, public, come and play, open to anybody. And I hope this is helpful. And I love feedback. Send me an email, send me a message, and you just go to my effortlessifs.com and contact. I'd love to hear how's this working for you. And I love feedback because that's how I learn. So tell me, like, Sid, the video, you talked way too fast, or that did made no sense to me. See you later. Bye.